Welcome everybody to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense, where me and John talk about pro wrestling at the moment and how logical it is. And I gotta say, right off the bat, not so logical sometimes. Um, First off, I wanna talk about some stuff that I thought was logical, which is a wildly left turn for our podcast.
Mm.
But I want to talk to you really quickly about the All Elite Wrestling pay-per-view that they had on, which was called Revolution.
Yeah,
Did you watch that show?
I did indeed.
What did you think of that show?
I think there was some good stuff on it, and then there was some stuff which didn't quite work for me. But the stuff that didn't work wasn't necessarily bad. I don't think it was just just poorly planned almost. Like the like opening match was Dustin Rhodes versus Jake Hager, which I thought was, not a great match to open a show with. It's not two guys that are, gonna go out there at this stage of their career and like have a great match or whatever. And there was another thing as well. The what was it? The booking of the MJF Cody Rhodes match as well was a bit off to me. Like it didn't quite work.
Oh,
But I will say the tag team title match was amazing. I know you don't like the Young Bucks, but I thought like just more so for the stories going on in the match, like the little kind of undercurrents going on, like the tension between Hangman and like Kenny Omega, like Omega still being kind of a bit beaten up from his match with Pac on Dynamite like a few days before, and then you got like the Young Bucks who are more so Matt Jackson than Nick Jackson, who's like willing to do whatever it takes to win the titles, whilst Nick isn't quite as into it and is a bit kind of like taken aback by the lengths that Matt was willing to go to. So I thought that was brilliant.
yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that tag match is like the best tag team match ever, which is insane. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, let's not go too far.
Yeah, like they're really bigging it up, and I'm like, I gotta say, as a Young Bucks match goes, it's probably one of the best Young Bucks matches I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's any exaggeration. It was fun. I thought it was a little bit too long, and just because I don't like the Young Bucks at all. Like sometimes, like one of them was like I don't know which one's which. They're the same, but one of them was like beating up Kenny Omega, and then he kind of like stopped himself and he looked all shocked, and like
Mm-hmm.
we and he just looked like an idiot. Like his facials, like he was too over the top, and I'm like, all right. And for the most part, the match was all right. It did start to get a little bit Young Bucksy near the end.
Yeah, some of the kickouts and whatnot.
Yeah, some of it was silly, but like for the most part, it was a pretty good match,
Mm-hmm.
So I quite liked that. There were other bits, like I really liked the Orange Cassidy Pac match.
Yeah.
Because I'd never really seen, like I imagine a lot of people hadn't really seen Orange Cassidy wrestle properly, and it was a fun match. Like it was fun to watch.
Mm.
And deep down, really, that's what you want when you watch wrestling. You want to watch it and just have fun. And for the most part, I think that pay-per-view did a pretty good job of that. I quite liked the end of the MJF Cody Rhodes match.
Okay.
Um, the finish with the punch and all that, because it leaves the door open for another rematch and for the show, for that story to go on a little longer, and it's a very Healy thing to do. I liked it, yeah. I was surprised to see Dean Ambrose win the championship.
Yeah.
Dean Ambrose, John Moxley.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's one of those things where I don't know. You could have seen it going either way, really, because I think obviously Jericho has had a really good run as champion, like the first ever AEW champion, and he's kind of put the title on the map, I think, in a lot of ways. not just with the matches he's had, but just, the like character work and segments and stuff, and just interactions with other like wrestlers as well has been, pretty damn good for someone this late in his career. But I guess it's like as good a time as any to switch the title now. And Jon Moxley is easily like the joint biggest or second biggest name in AEW thanks to his WWE career. So why not him? It switches it up. It kind of adds to the lineage and continues to make the title important. So why not?
Oh yeah, like I'm not saying it was a bad call. I was just like, kind of surprised that I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Because like again, like you said, Jericho's been doing such a good job as champion that he could have, still could have kept it on for a couple of months and nobody would have complained about that at all, But yeah, overall I thought pretty good show,
Yeah.
We which is funny because we were like just off a podcast where we were kind of critical about All Elite Wrestling, and then they put on a pretty good show.
Yeah,
and then
made us eat our words.
Then I thought the episode of Dynamite that came on like the week after that, pretty good show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, they're finally like starting to find their footing, but this is which is stuff we talked about, It's like you could see that there was good stuff there. They just needed to kind of, focus it a bit more, and I thought that was pretty good. So I can't remember if this did this. So we're gonna move on to something that didn't make sense right now, and I can't remember if this happened before or after Revolution. I think it was, either like the week before or the week after. But the WWE were in Saudi Arabia again. And like, I mean, it gives us stuff to talk about on our podcast, but I really wish that something stupid didn't happen every time they went to Saudi Arabia. Like, can't they just take a day off and not do something stupid in Saudi Arabia for us to talk about, because then it's just going to turn into the Saudi Arabia show where we won't be getting paid by the Saudis, so it would have no purpose whatsoever. But Goldberg, oh god, Goldberg was scheduled to fight the Fiend, Bray Wyatt, like a month before WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia. So everybody, myself included, and probably you as well, assumed that this was going to be rudimentary. Goldberg does a 5-minute match and then loses to the Fiend because the Fiend's been on a really good streak. And why would they take the belt off the Fiend a month before WrestleMania? That wouldn't make any sense. Especially not the Goldberg, who, God bless him, in his last couple of matches hasn't really set the world on fire. I think we can all agree on that. And everybody was pretty happy that Goldberg was like a spectacle kind of attraction, and he wasn't being some kind of Brock Lesnar situation, which we were all very happy with that. But, of course that didn't last. And of course I didn't watch the match, so I have no idea how long it went. I'm going to assume it went at least half an hour. And Goldberg fights the Fiend, who has looked unstoppable. Bearing in mind, this was a man that Seth Rollins had to like kill in the Hell in a Cell. Repeatedly hit him over the head with like a billion chairs and hammers and shit, and stomped him into the mat like 15 times. So Goldberg wins the match, and then immediately the Fiend doesn't get his rematch. He just decides he wants to fight John Cena.
Yep.
And then Goldberg decides he wants to fight Roman Reigns. Well, I guess Roman Reigns decided he wanted to fight Goldberg.
Yeah, he didn't even have to earn it or anything. He's just like, I'm next. And it's
but then
okay.
Goldberg didn't do anything to fucking earn it.
Well, yeah, true.
He just turned up. He's like, I'm Goldberg. And the Fiend was like, cool, that's good enough for me. See you in Saudi Arabia. So like, why wouldn't Roman Reigns go, all right, I don't want to fight the Fiend. He's scary, but some fucking 50-year-old dude who can't go more than 6 minutes, I'll fight you at WrestleMania. Hell yeah. Like, how does that, when you say it like that, how does that make Roman Reigns look good if he beats Goldberg at WrestleMania, right? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't, especially because, Roman Reigns has had, despite the fact that we all complain that the WWE are pushing Roman Reigns pretty well, I think we've talked about the fact that in the last couple of WrestleManias, Roman Reigns hasn't really been coming out on top all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if he can't beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, but he's good enough to fight Goldberg I don't know. It doesn't to me, it doesn't really put the shine on Roman Reigns the way that they would want him to. I thought your idea of him beating the Fiend made way more sense because at least, that would be a challenge, and that's the way they want to book Roman Reigns, is this big kind of like, tough babyface. And what better way to do that than putting him up against this unstoppable monster
Yeah.
in the Fiend? Like, that totally makes sense. So I was like, all right, I'm not, the Fiend versus Roman Reigns probably isn't going to be the most amazing match of all time, but it makes sense, and works for both those characters. I'll watch that match, no problem. I'm excited about it. But of course, that's not what we get at all. So now we have Goldberg versus Roman Reigns and John Cena versus The Fiend. Which, like, a month ago, I don't think either of us would have predicted.
Not at all.
No, quite a left turn there. And, whenever I heard this, because I didn't watch the show, and I assume you didn't watch the show either.
Which show? The Saudi show?
Saudi Arabia show, yeah.
No.
Because, we have no interest in that, and also the whole Saudi Arabia thing is a little sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've both been turned off about the whole thing.
Yes.
So, like, I don't know, man. I know why they did it. We all kind of know why they did it.
Mm-hmm.
They did it because Goldberg's a Neum, and going into WrestleMania, Goldberg being the champion, because, that shit got over on the social medias. People were talking about it. And the saying, all news is good news. So, like, even if people were like, this is the shittiest thing that ever happened, which is what some people were saying, it still meant that Goldberg ended up trending on Twitter, and it was the most liked Instagram post of all time, or whatever the fucking, and therefore it got people talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is that Goldberg, he apparently is still a draw now. But we're heading into WrestleMania 2020, and the champions are Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. And you gotta wonder why they can't build up anybody to be a Goldberg. Like, why don't they have anybody that has the same drawing power that Goldberg does? Like, why haven't they done a good job of building people up to make him seem like a threat? Like, that's entirely on them. I know I probably sound like such a fucking mark by saying it, but it's true. Like, it is true. Like, their reliance on, like, part-time people over WrestleMania has become so repetitive. It's like now part of WrestleMania.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And that means that instead of just having a one-off spectacle match at WrestleMania, we now have all of these part-timers, like, clogging up the road to WrestleMania. So now we're definitely, do you really need to sell people on Undertaker versus AJ Styles? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are going to watch it because it's The Undertaker.
Yeah.
If you had just put up Goldberg versus... See, if you just did Goldberg versus Roman Reigns, people would have been interested. Because they'd be like, all right, let's see how that goes. Because Goldberg's a Neum, and Roman Reigns is the guy they're trying to push. So, like, all right, fair enough, But then but now we have to see Goldberg going into this, and we have to, because they don't have a proper alternative to Goldberg. And the reason that they've been relying on Brock Lesnar so much is because it works, or it has worked in the past. And they're like, well, we don't have anybody who's as good as Brock Lesnar. Well, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Why Brock Lesnar being champion might work, but why is somebody beating Brock Lesnar not as big of a deal as it should be? Like Seth Rollins beat Brock Lesnar, right?
Yeah.
And look at Seth Rollins now. He's on he's in the middle of the card doing a thing with Kevin Owens, who is amazing. I love Kevin Owens. At the Elimination Chamber, which happened like 2 days ago or whatever. What day is today? Wednesday? We're recording this on a Wednesday, so it was like 3 days ago. Kevin Owens comes out of the crowd eating popcorn. And he didn't do anything. And I'm like, that man is so entertaining that he can just sit there eating popcorn and I'm going to pop for it. Why isn't he built up bigger? I think they're trying that. They're trying to build him up now, which is good because Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are so good. Can we deviate from Goldberg for a minor moment, if I may, to the relief of everybody, to say that at Elimination Chamber, something really good happened, which is something I didn't see happening, which was Sami Zayn becoming Intercontinental Champion.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Now, I think we had talked before on a podcast not so long ago about the possibility of it ending up at WrestleMania being Shinsuke Nakamura versus Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental Championship, which I was all for. I was like, please give that to me. And then they did this weird thing with Braun Strowman, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Right before WrestleMania, like putting the Intercontinental Championship on Braun Strowman, it kind of muddied the waters. So having Sami Zayn beating Braun Strowman, again, if we were to go like with traditional logic, which I realize by this point we have debunked as being not necessary in professional wrestling today. But if we were to go like under traditional kind of booking and logic and stuff like that, you would imagine that the way that this is going to set up is going to have Braun Strowman involved because he was in the middle of this feud and he was a former champion and he has beef with all three of those guys. So,
yeah. And he's been dicked out of the title as well.
Exactly. So you would imagine it's going to end up with Braun Strowman involved. Now it could end up being like some kind of fatal four-way with, you know, Nakamura and Cesaro and Sami Zayn and Braun Strowman, which admittedly I'm not going to say no to that. That would be interesting. But I just don't see why they had to put Braun Strowman in the middle because from the Royal Rumble till now, they could have told a great story with Shinsuke and Sami Zayn. Like they really could have. And it's weird the way that it's kind of come about, if you ask me. Again, I'm not going to shit on it too much because I'm very happy that Sami Zayn finally won a fucking championship. Long overdue. I think we can both agree on that.
Absolutely.
And again, like just him cutting his promo before his match, I'm like, he's so good. Him and Kevin Owens are so good. Give them all the belts. And then they kind of did, which was really cool. But so, you know, at least they're trying stuff now with like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. You could argue that this is shit they should have done years ago because these two guys are so good. So good. But if it means that this WrestleMania has to take a bit of a hit in order for next WrestleMania to have big stars like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, like being built up the way they're supposed to be for next year, then I'm all for it. However, do you think that's going to be the case?
Not at all. I think it's all about like the short term in terms of what can we do right now to kind of, because, you know, like ratings have dropped something like, well, I can't remember what it was, like something like 35% in 2-3 years, something like that. And, you know, you just have to go on Twitter when there's been like Raw or SmackDown or a pay-per-view or whatever to kind of see the kind of discontent from fans and whatnot about the majority of shows. And it's, you know, WWE is in a bit of a tough kind of moment. Well, I say moment, but this has been going on for a good few years of just declining interest, and especially now that you've got like alternatives out there like AEW and stuff as well. And so it's a weird situation that they find themselves in, where I guess, to play devil's advocate, this is maybe their reasoning for going for Goldberg as the Universal Champion heading into WrestleMania, like setting up this match with Roman Reigns. It's all about, I guess, trying to stack the odds of Roman being cheered and trying to anoint him as the chosen one, which is essentially what they've tried doing for like the last 4 or 5 years, however long it's been, since like the Shield originally broke up. Like they've put a lot of time and effort, and it's never really worked because I guess at the time they originally gave him the push, like everyone was more into Daniel Bryan because like he was sort of the organic babyface who kind of risen up and earned the spot himself. He wasn't handed anything, he kind of made it his own, whereas Roman Reigns has always had that kind of stink about him, like he's just like the corporate chosen one, rather than the people that the person that the people want to get behind. But I guess now maybe they figured if it was him against Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania, like he's maybe not going to get cheered in that situation, because Bray Wyatt as the Fiend has kind of become this almost like a cool character to most people, with the mask and the entrance and the puppets and all that kind of stuff. There's he's probably going to get cheered more than Roman Reigns in a title match between the two of them. So stick the belt on Goldberg, and all of a sudden Goldberg is a heel because people are pissed off that 53-year-old Goldberg is winning the Universal title, despite the fact that he's, his previous matches before this haven't been anything to write home about. They've like him and Taker almost killed each other at the previous Saudi show. So it's, I don't know, like the part of me thinks like it's, just look at it really cynically, it's all about putting the spotlight on Roman Reigns again and trying to make him I was going to say the top dog, but I guess the big dog is more apropos. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and again, like that would make sense if like Goldberg wasn't some kind of 53-year-old guy who can't work a match. Well, he can work a match, I don't want to, make it seem like I can work a match better than Goldberg can. He's gonna kick my ass. Let's be honest with you.
Yeah.
But if Goldberg beats the Fiend and then loses to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, it doesn't make the Fiend look good, and it doesn't make Roman Reigns look good, in my opinion. My esteemed opinion.
But what happens if the Fiend just runs through John Cena at WrestleMania?
I mean, I'm not gonna, I would be totally okay with that. But like, if Roman Reigns totally runs through Goldberg, which you would assume he would, then like, doesn't the Fiend look like an idiot?
Well, not necessarily. Like I say, if the Fiend Cena match can make you forget about the Fiend losing the Universal title to Goldberg the way he did, which apparently was 2 minutes 15, that match. The entrances lasted longer than the actual match itself. So
good God.
Yeah. But I think this is the thing, because it's the business is constantly moving. There's always the next show and the next angle and feud and whatnot. So it's not gonna hurt the Fiend forever, this Goldberg loss. And I think with the right kind of approach to whatever's next, he can definitely recover and kind of get back to being this unstoppable monster. But I think at the same time, like, I always thought it was weird that they kind of put the title on him so quickly anyway.
Yeah.
Like I think they should have done more to kind of build the character up and just establish him a bit more before like hotshotting the title onto him, because it was pretty much he showed up around SummerSlam last year and then he had that feud with Finn Balor and then it was like, yep, straight into the title scene. I was like, oh, okay.
Right, I totally agree with you on that. He was like kind of put in there because he proved to be popular, and they jumped the gun. I'm like, well, instead of doing that, they had spent time building up the Fiend to look really cool, so that by the time WrestleMania rolled around, i.e. now, and the match was Bray Wyatt versus Seth Rollins, people would be super into it. Because like you could easily have Seth Rollins seeing how popular the Fiend is and how destructive he is, and spending months running away from the Fiend and getting away from him and getting this cowardly heel heat and fighting everybody else and slipping through it, but not being able to get to the Fiend, and the Fiend not being able to get to him, so that by the time you do get to WrestleMania, people are excited about it. They actually want to see this match, and then if you wanted to, you could have the Fiend beat Rollins in like 3 minutes. Because then that would look fucking incredible for the Fiend. And, you could do it that way. But, and that would build stars, and that would get, people interested. And that's a good way to build to a WrestleMania match. But instead of that, they've done it like ass backwards. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, the Fiend is the kind of guy who doesn't need the championship, but like because he's so popular, it would make sense to give him like a championship run at some point.
Yeah.
So they should have like totally waited until WrestleMania before they did that, because if the Fiend is popular, ride that out. If he's popular, that means that he doesn't have to be in the title picture immediately. And he can just kind of stay around in the background and make a big deal and be built up and stuff like that, and build a mystique and become something that people want to see, and I think they jumped the gun with that one, and it's exactly the problem that we were talking about earlier. They don't seem to be able to build up people to be like an equivalent to Goldberg or anybody who might be a part-timer or anything like that. And if they did, and if they took their time with them, then you'd be all right. But they don't. Or if they do, they do it wrong. Like they pick Baron Corbin or something like that,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm all for the Baron Corbin push if it goes somewhere to mean something. But like, if last year he beat Kurt Angle, and he was, heading to SummerSlam. I'm like, I don't mind this so much because at least he's got momentum and they're doing stuff with him.
Mm-hmm.
But roll around to this year's WrestleMania, what's he doing?
Yeah,
Fat lot
of nothing.
Right. I'm like, well, then the Kurt Angle thing doesn't mean anything unless you keep the pressure on. They don't seem to be able to build people up right anymore. And that's definitely the problem. Like, John Cena is the last big fucking star they had. And that's a fact. Like, nobody else right now is on the level of John Cena. And that's weird because you've got Roman Reigns, who they've been pushing themselves. They've been trying to make him their homegrown star. And you've got AJ Styles, who's like, well recognized as one of the best wrestlers in the United States. You've got Daniel Bryan, who is also well recognized as one of the best wrestlers in the United States. You've got Shinsuke Nakamura, who in Japan was a very big deal. You've got all of these guys who are big names and should be like bigger than they are.
Yeah.
But for some reason something's just not clicking, and you gotta wonder why. You really gotta wonder why in a day and age like this that Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles aren't as big as John Cena. Right? Like, it's weird, and it's unbelievable that they have so much talent there, so much talent, in that company, and they can't seem to like build up a star.
Or is it that they actively choose not to build up a star? Because they've had it in the past where they built up guys like Austin, Rock, and whoever, and then they've at a certain point gone off and kind of left them. Like they've ended up going to do movies, or they get injured and they have to retire, or whatever. But it's almost like, because I've heard it said before that WWE wants to make WWE the draw rather than just one superstar or whatever. So it's almost like maybe they're deliberately not building up these stars to a certain level anymore because they want it to still be all about the company. So the company just keeps rolling on regardless of whether those stars are still there after however many years, or if they've moved on or whatever. The company is still the thing which kind of draws people to come out or buy, the network or whatever. But then that's not working anyway if, like, live event attendances are way down, ratings are down. I think like the network subscriptions have started dropping a little bit as well. And then they're talking about introducing this like tiered system where it's gonna, I think, end up putting more people off from sticking with the network as well. Like this whole you pay however much a month and you get like a basic package, but then you have to start paying extra for like big pay-per-views like WrestleMania and stuff. It's like, really?
Mm-hmm.
They're just like chasing the the bottom dollar rather than just trying to keep the fans happy.
Right. Like I think they waited too long for that subscription based thing to come into play. Like if they introduced that a couple of months or like a year after the network was already out, people wouldn't have minded so much, because then they would have got a taste of the network, and WWE would have been able to work kinks out with their back end, and would have been able to go, okay, so now you've seen what we have to offer. You got a little bit of that for now, but now we're introducing like a $15 ticket or whatever, or $20 ticket for like WrestleMania season. And to be honest, like that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
To put a little increase to watch WrestleMania. Like if they did it smart, like if there was a little increase to watch WrestleMania, I wouldn't be opposed to it, because I'm like, at least that makes sense because it's WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
And you want these guys to get paid for the fucking job they do, so give them a decent buy rate for it. It depends how, like, they need to work that shit out first, like, before I'm gonna comment on it too much. What I do think is true is what you were saying about them focusing on the WWE as a brand, because I think that's, that might be hearsay or whatever, but it appears to be the truth. They really do seem to be pushing the WWE as an experience and as the thing. Come to the show. It's not like come see Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
It's come to the show, and I think that's where they're screwing themselves over, because it's like a vicious circle. If you don't have a Stone Cold Steve Austin to push on the shows, then people aren't going to be interested. Everybody knew who Hulk Hogan was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Everybody. So therefore, if you go to a show, you're going to see Hulk Hogan. And then also, you're going to end up seeing some really good wrestling underneath it. That was the point. You had the big star. Everybody had a place on the card. And the big star was the guy bringing people to go see it. And, that's just the way it was. Like, it's not like egotism or whatever. That's just what they had to do. Austin had his place, and Rock had his place. And if you think about how much money they made off Stone Cold Steve Austin
Mm-hmm.
for like his 5 years at the top or whatever. He left in like 2002, and when did he get big? Like 1996?
Yeah, I'd say 97's when he really started hitting it off.
Yeah, 97 was probably his big time, or 98. But let's say 97 to like 2001 were like Austin's big period, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're afraid of losing people like Austin and The Rock, which I don't totally buy, but like if they were afraid of that, surely they could do the numbers and look at the money that Austin made for them in those 5 years compared to the money they're making now.
Yeah.
And they'd be able to see that the business model they're trying to work, which is the company is the draw, isn't working, because you have to have a big main event attraction. That's
Mm-hmm.
the point. Like, that's the fucking point. It doesn't make sense if everybody's on the same playing field, because then none of it matters. They need to have somebody like John Cena. And it doesn't really matter if people aren't or seem like they aren't digging Roman Reigns, because it really felt for a long time that people weren't digging John Cena either.
Mm-hmm.
But they kept the pressure on John Cena because A, they knew he could talk, and B, they knew he was a good worker. And I think the same is true of Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
The difference is they haven't really been able to let Roman Reigns just kind of talk the way he needs to, to show his real kind of personality. And I think if they do finally do that, you're going to have a really cool face, a really cool baby face. And that's, that would totally work. But if you don't, but they kept the pressure on John Cena, and all the time they were doing that, I was like, I don't like John Cena, I don't want to see him, and I would tune in to watch people like Punk and Carlito and Daniel Bryan and the Shield and stuff like that, and it didn't matter that John Cena was on top because you had all the other shit to worry about, but John Cena being on top meant that other people were going to get involved, because John Cena sold a shit ton of merchandise. People knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Not to the same level as Rocky and Austin, but people knew who he was. And that's the trick. That's the big deal. If you go out and ask a lot of people now who Roman Reigns is, they're not going to know. But if you ask them who John Cena is, they're going to know.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference. Like, they really need to start focusing on building up one guy. And if it happens to be Roman Reigns, a lot of people aren't going to be happy, but fuck it. Roman Reigns is he's a good guy to do it. He's a dependable hand. He can work. He knows what to do. Have it be Roman Reigns. That's fine. That doesn't matter. If it means Roman Reigns is on top for a year and Goldberg isn't champion for a month, then I'm happy with that. Like, where's the problem, right? If they build Roman Reigns to be fucking good, then he's gonna sell a ton of merchandise, and I don't know. I feel like they're screwing themselves over.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's important to say that it's not an easy thing to kind of organically, push that guy to the absolute tip top. Make him into like an Austin or Rock in terms of like crossover appeal and merchandise sales and all that kind of stuff. Because I mean, just look at Becky Lynch, like the kind of wave she rode to WrestleMania last year was huge. And she kind of did it all on her own, really. She organically got over and got the fans behind her to the point where she essentially, like, the start of her big run came when she turned heel on Charlotte, but then no one bought her as a heel. They started cheering her as she made the turn. So I kind of sowed the seeds of that whole situation and kind of forced WWE to go with what the fans wanted and make her a face. But then, like, since her big WrestleMania moment where she kind of reached the top of the mountain and finally won the title, like, you could argue she's not had a really, standout year since then, which I think is in part because of the just like the opponents and the feuds that she's kind of had to wrestle haven't been of a high enough quality to kind of keep her like coming across as a big star. Like, like I think the first feud she had after WrestleMania last year on Raw was against Lacey Evans, who, without any disrespect to Lacey Evans, but she was just, pretty much straight up from NXT, where she hadn't done a whole lot to begin with. And she's still quite green in the ring as well. Like she's still kind of finding her feet as a performer. So putting Becky as like a first post WrestleMania feud with Lacey Evans is not gonna grab anyone's attention, really, is it? It's just gonna, it was always going to be a step down from like Ronda Rousey and Charlotte, but it was a huge step down when you go from that to Lacey.
Yeah, it was interesting. If I may go back to Austin and Rock for a second to draw some comparisons. I mean, the thing about Rocky is like he was an anomaly. Like you're never gonna get another Rock.
No.
Like he just kind of came out of nowhere and was fantastic at what he did. You'll never get another Rock. They were lucky to get as much kind of money out of him as they could. But with Austin, if you look at Austin whenever he was champion, the main thing running through that feud with Mr. McMahon was Austin not being the champion.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the story. Vince McMahon didn't want Austin to be the champion. And while it's a very oblique way of doing it, the point of it is to have like a legitimate threat to the champion, to have stakes against your main face. And Austin always looked really good. Even if he lost, he would lose because he got screwed over or there was interference or some kind of shenanigans. So he always looked good even in defeat. And so, like him and The Undertaker and Kane and, like Kane in the First Blood match kind of ripping the belt away from him. And, stuff like that. Like, you knew Austin was good. It was just he had the odds constantly stacked in his favor as champion. And Becky Lynch hasn't had that at all. She has had a really good year. But the problem with it is the people that she's fighting, like Lacey Evans and et cetera, haven't really seemed like big threats. And they haven't done anything to screw Becky Lynch over, and they haven't done anything to get one over on Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch looks good no matter what she does. And but the problem with that is nobody else has a chance to look good. Like when Austin, would come out of a match looking good, it was because he was, fighting The Undertaker or Kane or a big name or then there would be shenanigans if it was like a different opponent or something like that. There was always something to keep the guy on his toes. And Becky Lynch hasn't really had a threat like that.
I mean, aside from Asuka, maybe.
True. And I was kind of hoping that they would do a title switch. Maybe not at the Royal Rumble, but like that was a title switch at some point was what needed to happen, because I think going into WrestleMania, it's a good angle if Becky is chasing the belt rather than the champion. Now that brings into question this year's WrestleMania, where they've done kind of the opposite. They've had Becky going in as champion, and they've done a very good job of building up Shayna Baszler as a challenger.
Yeah.
They've done a very good job of that, which is very interesting. And I can only imagine that that's going to end with Shayna Baszler winning the belt at WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
Because then Shayna looks like an unstoppable monster, and now there's stakes. Now Becky has to. Now she's seen what she's up against. She's finally fought Shayna Baszler and lost. She knows that the deck stacked against her, and she has to come back from that and rise up. And I think coming out of WrestleMania, you're going to see some really good stuff from Becky Lynch. Not that we haven't been seeing good stuff from her already, but because you're going to have that threat there that can rival Becky Lynch, then you're going to see some good stuff. Because I think that, that's kind of been the problem, is that she hasn't really had a big challenge. Like you said, no offense to Lacey Evans, but Lacey Evans is no challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you started to get stuff where Lacey Evans and Baron Corbin were together, and there was the opportunity for shenanigans. You could see, like they would do different match types and stipulations and yada yada. And you're like, okay, well, if Lacey Evans screwed Becky Lynch out of the belt, that's going to put huge heat on Lacey Evans.
Yeah.
Now, the problem, like you said, was that she's still kind of green, so, like, who knows how well she would have been able to run with it. But, you know, it would still would have, but then again, like, if it didn't work, put the belt back on Becky. Then she can chase the belt again. Because that's the same thing that happened with Austin, and you know, like the title, like if you count up how many days Austin was champion, it's not a whole lot. Like, I think his longest championship run was when he was a heel.
Oh, really?
I believe so. Like, coming out of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Into the summer, because whenever he was champion before that, in like 98 and 99, there was always somebody screwing him out of stuff, and there was always, like, you know, shenanigans, and you knew he was going to get the belt back, but the trick is, how was he going to get the belt back? And, you know, that's the kind of thing that they could have done with not necessarily Lacey Evans, but a Lacey Evans kind of person. Somebody could have, you know, it could have happened with Asuka. If you have a situation where Asuka were to use the green mist, or have Kairi Sane to interfere, or something like that, you know, no, it's going to make sense, because Asuka's a good worker, but also she's a heel. She's cheated her way out of the belt, and, you know, got one over on Becky Lynch. So Becky Lynch now has sympathy, and she has reason to fight, and things like that. You know that if it was a real fight, Asuka would probably kill Becky Lynch, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But because it's wrestling, you could easily build up Becky Lynch back into that underdog and say, I was screwed out of that belt, I want another shot, yada yada. And Asuka would work really well as a champion like that, for example. Better than Lacey Evans anyway. The chances to build those stakes have been there. And it's been interesting that they haven't pulled the trigger on those. You know what I mean? But then that got me thinking, because, like I said, it feels like what they're doing is definitely leading to Shayna Baszler winning the belt at WrestleMania, which I'm not opposed to at all. I love Shayna Baszler.
Yeah.
She's so good. But then, does that lead to Shayna Baszler versus Ronda Rousey at SummerSlam?
I mean, that's definitely one way they can go. It all depends on what Ronda wants to do, though. Like, because the big rumor was she was taking time off after last year's WrestleMania so she could have a kid, but that never really happened. So, is that still a priority for her? And if so, you know, is she gonna have any desire to come back and do any more wrestling? Or
Well, I hope so. Like that, I had heard that rumor too, and I was like, you know, that makes sense. But the thing is, like, you could have got another year out of Ronda Rousey.
Yeah,
for sure. Like, you could easily have said, listen, you know, one more year, you can do your family stuff after that. Because, like you said, clearly in the past year, that hasn't happened. That hasn't worked out. So Ronda could have been around, and even if it was just a couple of pay-per-views or a couple of months build for like a couple of matches or whatever, in and out. Like, say after WrestleMania, she took a month or two off, came back to build up to WrestleMania, or to build up to SummerSlam, took a month or two off, built up to Survivor Series, you know, like, or to the Royal Rumble. You know, that would have worked, and it would have worked for her character as well. And then you would have had Ronda Rousey in a high-profile match at this year's WrestleMania, and nobody would have complained about it. So, like, I really feel like I feel like what she's done already in the WWE has been great, and they need to kind of capitalize on that a little bit more. I don't think she's finished with her WWE career, and I think it would be a shame if they did kind of finish it off just with the one and done gimmick. I think there's more legs, and I think that Shayna Baszler versus Ronda Rousey, say they did that and Ronda Rousey beat Shayna Baszler, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And then after that, you could have like a triple threat between Becky and Shayna and Ronda. I would be down for that. Or even Stevie make it a fatal four-way with Charlotte in there. I'd fucking love that. You know, that stuff could work. I just feel like, yeah, I think Ronda Rousey should come back for like, even if she came back for like 6 months and finished up at SummerSlam, it would, you've got, there's money there to be made. And I think she should make it now and then focus on her family. You know, if she came back for another 6 months or for another year, it would be it would be good closure for her career, and they could milk some money off it, and then she could go have a family, and then she could like be a wee part timer and come in at every WrestleMania, and you know it would be grand because she is a big name, and it's weird that she's a big name that they're not using because they're not doing a very good job of negotiating with her. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
she's a tough kid. Put her on TV, make her look bad. Well, bad as in badass, not bad as in a shitty worker. And then, you know, then you've got stakes. Then you've got somebody to fight against, and you can build somebody up against them, you know, instead of, you know, I don't know. But does that sound weird, me saying that whenever like 20 minutes ago I was objecting to Goldberg doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Does
Yeah,
it?
but not necessarily, because I mean, Ronda is still, you know, in the prime of her career. She's still someone who has got a lot to offer the wrestling business, whereas Goldberg is someone who is extremely limited by his.
He always has been.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even more so now because he doesn't have any gas in the tank. He gets blown up after 3 minutes, and then he can't even seemingly do his like moves anymore. He can pretty much just about do a spear, but when it comes to a jackhammer, he's pretty much constantly almost dropping people on their heads. So yeah, I mean, compare that to Ronda, and it's apples and oranges, isn't it?
It really is. Like I feel like if Ronda came back and won the belt, it would look really good for whoever beats her again.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like whoever beats Goldberg at WrestleMania this year, it doesn't have that big of a shine.
No.
I would fucking love Ronda Rousey to come back and beat Goldberg.
Yeah.
If she beat Goldberg, then I would go, holy fucking shit. I am dying for this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And Ronda Rousey is one of those people that if she did win that heavyweight championship, a lot of people would be like, well, it's hard pressed to find somebody tougher than Ronda Rousey.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. If you're gonna have any woman win your heavyweight championship, fucking make it Ronda Rousey. You know.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think this is gonna happen. But my goodness, I would freak out if that happened. But well, it might not even happen. There might not even be a WrestleMania because there's this big. I don't know if you've heard about this in the news, but there's been this big outbreak of a coronavirus.
Coronavirus? What's that?
Coronavirus. I don't know what it is. It's some kind of big fucking deal. It's one of those like Chinese imports that everybody goes nuts about, you know.
Right.
It seems to be it's a big talking point these days. Everybody's talking about it on social media and stuff. And it's one of those things everybody, you know, it's a new cool thing to have, you know.
Well, it's officially been made a pandemic today, a global pandemic.
Oh, good Lord. So that means we should all be really worried about it.
Yes.
I mean, I'm fine because I never leave the house anyway.
Yeah.
There you go. That's how you do it. But it means that recently a lot of big events, and not just wrestling events, but like any kind of event where crowds have to gather, you know, festivals and
Mm-hmm.
you know, musicians and things like this, gigs, all of this, different performances. A lot of these have been postponed or kind of cancelled or set aside because of the risk of the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
And where is WrestleMania happening this year? Or
Tampa Bay.
Florida.
Yes.
Now there's been, I don't want to say there's been an outbreak, but there's been cases reported in Tampa, haven't there? Or in Florida.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So,
in fact, I think in Tampa as well.
So because of that, there's been a talk of the city of Tampa and, you know, the state of Florida doing a kind of clampdown on big events and postponing them and kind of putting them aside until people can figure out what's going on with this coronavirus, until it dies down a little bit, which could put WrestleMania in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Which would mean Goldberg would be champion for even longer. Not happy about it. So what do you think about that? What do you think about the chances of WrestleMania not or being postponed at the very least?
Well, I don't know. I would have said like a month ago, or even like a couple of weeks ago, I would have said no chance. They've got too much money invested in it, too much of their like financials depend on WrestleMania and like the income it brings in, that they cannot afford to postpone it, because it's not just a case of like oh, we can just put it on like 2 weeks later. No, because they had to book that stadium like literally years in advance. Then you've got all the fans who kind of booked hotels and stuff, and all the conventions and WrestleMania access and all the extra stuff that goes into making WrestleMania like this standout week-long event. Like, you cannot just rearrange that at the drop of a hat, and not without like lots and lots of trouble. So if they have to postpone WrestleMania this year, it's going to have such a huge impact on the company, a huge negative impact. So, man, I don't know. The way things are going, just like over here, like the way it's kind of starting to escalate with the number of cases being reported, and like the increase in all the warnings and stuff about washing your hands and all that kind of jazz. It's like, this is serious, and at some point it's gonna really like explode. So, man, it would be weird if WrestleMania ends up being a casualty of it.
Well, the problem is, like, yeah, it's pretty wild over here, but I think it's worse in America because of their healthcare system. And we're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna get super political for a second.
Yeah.
But like the way it's set up is that, like, I've heard about so many people that just can't afford to take days off sick, so they
Mm-hmm.
have to go into work. And if they are infected or have a risk of being infected, that's going to make things worse because they can't afford to not work a day if they're not getting paid. And two, they can't afford to get sick because their healthcare system is so messed up. So the one thing that this has done is put like shone a huge light on America and their healthcare system. And it's funny that it's happened at a time where they're coming up to trying to figure out who the next Democratic presidential candidate's going to be.
Mm.
And funny that Bernie Sanders, with all his talk of we're going to fix the fucking healthcare system, in the middle of this pandemic and strife involving this virus, it's amazing that so many people have been like, no, we don't want that.
I
In
know.
the fucking middle of a crisis that they need to solve with healthcare systems like that, they're like, no, we don't want that. It's unbelievable how in the middle of a virus outbreak, Americans can be so hard-headed.
Well, I think it's been sort of bred into them that sort of universal healthcare is socialist, and socialist almost equals communist, and because of like the ingrained, you know, like distrust of Russia and stuff, going back to the Cold War and everything, it's like, well, it's more psychological that they don't want this stuff, whereas like if they actually, thought about the benefits and were like, oh, you mean if I just paid like a little bit extra with my taxes, I could, go to the hospital when I'm sick and not be thousands of dollars in debt. It's like, oh,
I, like
that sounds like a pretty good deal.
I get sick all the time. This is amazing.
Yeah.
What's super weird about that, and we will get back to talking about wrestling in a second, but what's super weird about that is how, like, there was that whole Russian thing about the Russian influence helping like Donald Trump become president and like all that shit.
Mm.
And whenever that happened, everybody was like, "Oh no, we don't hate Russia. That don't be ridiculous. Russia's because anything that helps Donald Trump must be where's the harm in getting help from Russia? Even if it was illegal, whatever." Like if that became a defense, they're like, "Well, Russia's not that bad." I'm like, "Oh, you guys have forgotten about the Cold War already?" But now they're back to like, "Oh, we can't be communists." I'm like, "Fuck that." Like, if it means you're still alive, then
Yeah.
what's the fucking harm of being a communist? And also, really, when you think about it, What's wrong with communism anyway? It didn't work in Russia, but that doesn't mean it won't work over here. I mean, you laugh, but the fucking democracy we have isn't working too well for us either. So,
Yeah.
you know. Anyway, the point is, WrestleMania could be in trouble, could be in jeopardy, which is really interesting. And like, Vince McMahon's the kind of guy who'd be like, no, put the show on. He's a stubborn guy. But this could be out of his hands.
Yeah, it could be a situation where even if they do put the show on, like half the crowd doesn't show up because they're afraid of, catching this virus. And
right, but like, what if one of the wrestlers catches it?
Yeah.
And then they're, it's a tough situation to call, and like, really, it's the kind of thing where everybody just kind of needs to take like a month or two off to just kind of survey the damage and figure things out. While we're in the middle of it being severe, we need to kind of like, not necessarily contain it, but like do our best to not fucking spread it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. This really kind of, like you said, a couple of weeks ago, I wouldn't have said it was a possibility. But it feels like today and yesterday, there was a lot of talk about, because it seems to have ramped up so much. It really seems like now the WrestleMania is in a real, it's in a real question mark kind of situation. We don't know if it's going to happen.
And like you're saying, like the with the healthcare system over in America, but not only that, like the government response as well, where they've trying to downplay it and they haven't been prepared, even though like we've known about coronavirus going back to something like October of last year. Like they haven't, got all the tests that they need to kind of have available for people to get tested. So it's a situation where it feels like it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Right, like, all jokes aside, I feel like really worried about America right now.
Yeah.
Because of the way their health system is, and because of, like what you said, the way that they've kind of had stuff ingrained into their head, where like, the system they have, they just accept that that's the way it is. And you don't go to the hospital if you're sick, and you don't take days off if you're sick. Like, it's just gonna work itself into trouble. I think America is gonna end up being like the one country that's hit hardest by this.
Yeah.
Which is insane, given that it's supposed to be like, the shining beacon of the free world, And if it's taken down by a virus so easily, it's going to be just astounding. So yeah, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. Like everybody else, I guess we're just gonna have to kind of wait and see how the coronavirus kind of plays itself out.
You've got like about 3 weeks to go until WrestleMania, something like that, 3 or 4 weeks. So
yeah, they said it was on the Elimination Chamber show. They said that we were a month away from WrestleMania, so we're just under 4 weeks away from WrestleMania. And if they do postpone it, that's the kind of thing that they have to announce well before the show.
Yeah.
They can't say, hey, no WrestleMania the day before WrestleMania, because people are going to be in town and people are going to be, like you said, they're going to be traveling. They're going to have hotels booked and shit. Like, they need to announce that kind of stuff, like this week or next week, really. And it doesn't seem like there's any sign of them announcing anything like that this week. So we're going to have to kind of hold our ground and see what happens. And maybe the next podcast we do is going to be us talking about the coronavirus. They should fucking hire the coronavirus because it's a bigger name.
Yeah.
Fucking Rob. What's that guy's name? That football player?
Oh, Gronk.
Gorginski?
Yeah, Gronkowski.
What is his fucking name? Look, let's just call him Rob.
Yeah.
Way bigger name than that fucking guy. Bring him in, have him beat Goldberg. I don't want Goldberg to die. I want that to just be on the record. I do not want Goldberg to die for the coronavirus. I'm just saying, you have the coronavirus beat Goldberg in a wrestling match and have him be the champion. And then, fucking, because everybody wants to see the coronavirus get its comeuppance. right? Classic heel babyface situation. If Roman Reigns comes in and beats the coronavirus, he's gonna look like a champion. That's all I'm going to say. So I guess we're gonna have to just kind of wait and see, and see how this all plays out. It's a very interesting situation, very strange time to be a wrestling fan right now. But yes, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap things up?
I mean, I think we've covered pretty much a whole host of topics here, so.
Yeah, we pretty much nailed everything. So fingers crossed, we will see you guys in the next episode. Hopefully something happens for us to talk about it.
I'm sure it will.
You know, maybe we'll just end up talking about Goldberg again. But we shall see. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for checking out the show, and make sure to check us out in the next episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time.